All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our talk today. We'll do some introductions, but today we're going to talk about keys to creating and maintaining a diverse workforce. And here we go. So a little bit about us. I'm Dr. Jakin Vela. I'm the Executive Director of the International Game Developers Association, the IGDA. The IGDA is the largest nonprofit member-based organization that supports individual game creators. Our mission is to support and empower game developers all around the world in achieving fulfilling and sustainable careers. I'm joined by my amazing colleague, Suzanne Freyjadis.
And I am the director of, what am I, the director of global development at the IGDA?
Everything.
And I have a master's in women's and gender studies focused on diversity in games and a undergrad degree in international relations. So it really works out well that I have this job.
Yes, it does. And pairing me, I'm a sociologist, so I'm very much passionate about global diversity from like a global lens and its impact in games industry and games impact on society, et cetera. So I think we kind of complement each other well in our realms and domains of competency. So speaking of diversity and games industry, a lot of our conversation today is going to be about a little bit more catered towards game developers, games industry, because that's the domain we work in, but it can easily be applied to tech at large, although I would argue that games are a little bit behind in a lot of ways. So speaking of diversity, most in the games industry believe that diversity is important. And Suzanne, you want to read those stats? Because it's very bright up here.
It is. Oh, and so if you look at the developer satisfaction survey that the IGDA does every year, or every 2 years?
Yeah, 2 years.
Every 2 years. The most recent one has that diversity is important to the industry is 90%, important in the workplace is 87%, and important in game content is 89%. So we are in agreement. Diversity is important.
Yeah, so now that we know we all pretty much agree that diversity is important, that begs the question, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, if it's important, then what do we do about it? Because I feel like when we talk about diversity, you can talk a lot about what it is, but how to implement strategies, how to implement tools to ensure that you're supportive of diverse initiatives. That's a whole other topic.
It is. So let's find out what we're going to tell you to do about diversity.
All right, well, before we jump into the checkbox, because like I said, like it's all about doing, right? Well, I'm actually going to go a step back. It's actually about first aligning. One thing that I think companies, organizations, really anyone, they get into the habit of action, and I think we're all, especially in the tech industry, it's like results, like get it done, and then reiterate and iterate. Well, whenever you're doing work regarding diversity, equity, inclusion in the workplace, I think first and foremost, you need to get aligned. You need to do some inner work first before you start doing outer work. And by inner work, I'm really talking about your organization's mission, your vision, and your values. So for mission, that's what you do. So your mission doesn't have to say, we do X, Y, and Z diversity or inclusion. Like it doesn't have to have the words DEI in them. But if you cannot tie your DEI approaches or strategies to your mission, then they will fail, because then you're just doing stuff to do stuff. Things have to tie back to your mission. If you need to revise your mission, then revise your mission, absolutely. Talk to your board, talk to your group, talk to your organization, and do that. But it has to be tied back to what you do foundationally. Otherwise, it will not thrive. The second one is vision. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Suzanne?
I think how you think about diversity, inclusion, and belonging in the workplace is really important. So we've got our mission tied to it, and now we've got to think about how we think about it as a company or an organization, and what we actually want our future to look like, how we want diversity to be part of this organization. You can't just ad hoc throw in some random humans and hope for the best, right? You have to really have thought through the vision part.
Right, because it's really like sort of an end goal, like the ideal that you're reaching is,
Yes.
wouldn't it be nice if we lived in a world that blank? That's really that vision. And you work towards your mission to reach that vision through your values. Your values should be guiding everything you do, from, what types of coffee you're buying to how you're hiring and how, like, seriously though, like,
It's true.
because if your values is sustainability, where are you buying your coffee?
Yeah.
If your values are diversity, equity, inclusion, how are you posting jobs and where are you getting applicants? So we'll talk a little bit more about all these, but first we have to get aligned. And, oh, yes, say it.
I love this quote you've got on, or the statement, if it's not in the budget, it is not a priority. So if you are not putting money into it, then, as Jakin says, you're relying on unpaid labor of people that fit into the diversity and inclusion, like, bracket, right? And you're like, oh, hey, I noticed that you are X. Would you like to start a club? And that's not the job of people that are diverse. The job, you've got to have a budget line for it.
Absolutely. We want to empower people to support inclusion in the workplace. That doesn't always entail relying on marginalized or minoritized identities to do all the work and then calling yourself a diverse organization or diverse company. And we see that quite a bit, unfortunately. So yeah, if it's not in the budget, then it's not a priority, which goes back to mission, vision, and value. So we talked a little bit about that, but we only have a small amount of time today, so we really want to just touch on three kind of components of hiring and retaining a diverse workplace.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about how are you hiring, we're going to talk about mentorship, and we're going to talk about how are you thinking about retention, because most companies, especially in tech, do not think about retention. And there's way too much in the games industry, way too much turnover.
Yes, especially after 3 to 5 years in the games industry, it's very common to see people, especially among marginalized populations, leave the industry due to a lot of issues that the games industry faces. And I'm talking from a global perspective. This includes crunch, pay disparities, social inequities, you name it. So, where to find diverse applicants? We're going to start there, because I think we get this question a lot, and I often get like, well, Jakin, there's just not enough diverse applicants. And well, yeah, that's just not a good question. But the question is, how can I hire to empower applicants who are from marginalized populations or who have minoritized identities to feel comfortable and empowered and encouraged to apply to my company or organization? That is the question I would love to hear more of. So, oh yeah, go ahead.
And the important thing about hiring diverse applicants is you're not going to find them on LinkedIn. You're not going to find them through the regular job boards. That's not necessarily how you're going to get the most diverse applicants. As Sherry said this morning in her talk, there's still only 12% women in the games industry. 12%, that's ludicrous. And you're sure as heck not going to get them by requiring them to have experience specifically in that industry. You want people to work in the metaverse. You want diverse applicants that work in the metaverse. You may have to look outside of that and find people that have skills that are linked, but aren't that transfer as opposed to exactly what you're looking for, because you're just going to find somebody else who works right next door, and that's not what we're talking about here.
Right. You're not broadening your search pool enough.
Right.
And there's plenty of talent out there. And you bring up a good point. Really, the issue with hiring starts with the job application itself. So when you post a job saying, I need 3 years of X, Y, and Z, I need this amount of experience, I need these skills, you have to go back to the mission, vision, values of your company. Do you really need all of those things to accomplish the goal that this job or the person in this job is accomplishing? Because if you're hiring somebody who's 100% qualified, then they're probably most likely actually overqualified for the position. Also, women tend to are less likely to apply to a job when they're not 100% qualified. So your job posting in and of itself may already have an impact on who is applying, the applicant pool that you have. Now, when I say this, I hope no one is like making the analogy of, well, now you're telling me to hire less qualified people. No, I'm actually telling you to write better job descriptions that actually fit what you're looking for. Because when you say must have 5 years in XYZ topic, what does that mean? Break that down. So if 5 years to you equates to, okay, needs to be able to creatively innovate and solve X problems in this time frame, or use this framework, or do these things, that's a deliverable that people can say, okay, I can do these things. But oftentimes people can't say, well, no, I don't have 5 years in the industry because I haven't had a chance.
I haven't been working on a 3D for 5 years, but I've been working on something real similar.
Yeah, exactly. Transferable skills. Another thing is the applicant tracking systems people use. So whether you're using LinkedIn to get all your people, or you use another application software, those can have a lot of biases as well by just kind of like, if you check the box that you don't want to get anyone who's, outside of that 5-year mark, or you had a great example.
Well,
globally.
yeah, a friend of mine who's in Pakistan would like to move, and he's found that a lot of the jobs that are in Europe just automatically boot him because it says Pakistan in his address. And so he's really frustrated because he doesn't even get through the, the application software.
Yeah, and so it goes back to the values again. Is there a reason you're only hiring within a specific region? I mean, or are there financial reasons you're only doing that? And if so, what is more valuable, or what is the priority for your organization? Is it to diversify, whether on a global scale, regional scale, et cetera, or is it to do the same thing over and over again because your accountant or lawyer says that's the easiest way to do something? The other thing is the applicant experience. So when you're talking about the hiring process, you're not just talking about the application, you're not just talking about the submission, but from A to Z. So really the hiring, the interviewing. There's a lot of unconscious bias that can come into the interview process. So you can take a lot of approaches to minimize that unconscious bias. So whoever's hiring applicants who are applying, they can implement strategies like doing Zoom calls without video. This can minimize or limit unconscious bias. I'm not saying we're all intentionally making decisions based on one aspect of an individual or applicant, but we have unconscious biases, and those are things that just come out. So there's one thing that this company Handshake does. Handshake is a job platform typically geared towards like college students or first entry professionals. They put this at the very top of their job description. Everyone is welcome at Handshake. We know diverse teams build better products and are committed to creating an inclusive culture built on a foundation of respect for all individuals. We strongly encourage candidates from non-traditional backgrounds, historically marginalized, or underrepresented groups to apply. If you are not sure that you are 100% qualified, but up for the challenge, we want you to apply. We believe skills are transferable, and passion for our mission goes a long way. I read that all because how empowering is that? It goes back to the thing we were talking about earlier, empowering people to feel comfortable even giving your company or organization a shot, because they might not know what your culture is like until they get there. But this right here says, we're inclusive. We're willing to try.
Want you.
Yes.
We actively want a diverse. That goes back to mission and values. What we are looking for is diversity because it creates better products, which it does.
So in addition to the hiring, let's say you get the right candidate on, how do you keep them? So retention is a big part of diversity and inclusion in the workplace, but one piece of that retention part is mentorship. So Suzanne, I would love to hear what you have to say about mentorship.
Mentorship is, here's the thing about mentorship. Mentorship can be informal and mentorship can be formal. And informal mentorship is stopping by someone's desk or chatting with someone after a meeting has ended over Zoom, right? Talking to them, checking in on them, ringing up someone who's new, who is in your team, making sure they're doing okay. That's informal, but that's still mentorship, right? Even if it's just a small conversation, that can really last for people. And then there's formal mentorship. And formal mentorship is something like we do at the IGDA, where you sign up as a mentee or a mentor, you're paired, it's a 3-month-long process so that the mentors and the mentees get to have conversations with each other and they can go through goals. That's another kind of mentorship, and that's something that companies who are looking to retain a diverse workforce can utilize through us or through other mentorship platforms. And if you look at this statistic, only 20% of game developers report DEI retention programs in their work. That's just, I couldn't even finish saying that sentence because it is just miserable and depressing, because retention is huge. If you go through all the trouble of recruiting a diverse workforce and then they leave after 3 to 5 years, because if they leave your company, they leave the industry most of the time. They're like, oh, hell, I'm out. And that is not good for any of us. We're all poorer for it.
No, that's a great point. And another thing I appreciate about mentorship is I think it's a very impactful but low-hanging fruit.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is if you don't have a mentorship program in your company or organization, you can get that started up next week by saying, all right, leadership team, we all need to take on 3 to 5 mentees, or however big your company is, however big your leadership team is. And these are the 3 things we're going to do with them. We're going to talk about their goals for the next 3 years, how we can support them in this organization or company, and we're going to push them to tools or resources that they might not even know exist in the company. Because believe it or not, a lot of people don't even know what resources are available in their own company. They don't even know what employee resource groups are available. They don't know what how to even find the policies that are related to their workplace. This is all information that mentors can provide in the workplace. If you don't have that capacity as an organization, like Suzanne said, you can partner with organizations like the IGDA to help facilitate stronger mentorship experiences. Now, speaking of policies, I mentioned a lot of people don't even know what policies exist. Let's talk about some policies you definitely want in your organization to ensure you are supporting diversity and inclusion. First and foremost is equal opportunity. So policies around your hiring practices, that you are open to hiring people of diverse backgrounds. Again, from a global perspective, this is culture, gender, race, ethnicity, language, really so much, neurodiversity, the list goes on. Additionally, you want to start having strong reporting and metrics for your retention. Who from their applicants is actually getting an interview?
Yes.
What percentage of those who are interviewed that are minorities, women, people of color, etc. What percentage of those people are actually getting an offer? What percentage of those people who are getting an offer are actually onboarding? Find out where those gaps are. Is the major gap at the application? It's like, oh, we're just not getting anybody.
Yeah.
Because then, we need to talk about the job postings. But if it's from the interview to the onboarding, or to the offer, then we probably need to talk about some unconscious bias training in your company. Additionally, creating safe spaces for people from a global diversity perspective. Again, that kind of goes back to the equal opportunity aspect. Having strong policies on harassment and reporting issues in the workplace, so violations, ethic violations, etc. And then flexible work times. These are all just a few policies that you should be considering to support the last component that we're going to talk about, to not only begin bringing in a stronger, diverse and inclusive workforce, but keeping it there at your community.
Yes. And so, step 1, listen to your employees. Really just listen to all your employees, but don't just listen to them. Sure, if someone says, hey, I just need to talk to you, and they tell you something, if it is a harassment, if it's an issue, if something's happening that's stalling them in their progress, that don't just listen, but then do something. The biggest complaint that people who are from, other countries, minorities, women, is that people will listen and then nothing happens. And so that is a key component, because you want your employees to trust that you actually care about retaining them. That's really key.
And if I can interject in there, I kind of really, I say this going back to mission, vision, values, because that's the foundation of the points that we're making. When you do have an employee come to you and you're listening and you want to do something, your actions should then be guided by those values. If your value is to ensure solidarity among your company, among the community, then how do you make that person feel included or a part of your system? If the value is leadership, how do you, as a leader, do something to ensure that you're solving problems that people are coming to you with? It really goes back to those values again. So yeah, sorry, the next one.
And then the next one is be respectful of culture. Their outward appearance is really none of anyone's business. Unless there's something disrespectful happening, it is generally how people present themselves in the workforce is their own decision. So regardless of headwear, regardless of how people dress, what their hair is like, what choices they make regarding whatever their outward appearance is, really shouldn't have any business to do with your company. And yet again, that goes back to the values, right? Core values. If you require a uniform, then state that you require a uniform and make sure that everybody lives up to that. If everybody needs to wear a polo shirt, then okay. But other than that, you have to be respectful of people's culture and how they represent that.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add, whatever there is like related to sort of dress codes or anything to attire, if it's not being driven by a purpose, like a mission of your company, or like it's a necessity of the business that you're running, then you're actually likely creating some socioeconomic division, especially if the attire that is required is expensive, hard to get, hard to find fitting for certain sizes, etc. So going back, always make sure things are guided by the mission.
Then there's remote work, and remote work means that if you have people working remotely and they're hired to work remotely, that you let them maintain their remote status, but also that you pay people the same across locations. So if you hire somebody in Paraguay, you pay them the same amount that you would pay somebody to live in Cincinnati, Ohio. That's just, there's an equitable situation there, and that is, there's a standard of values, mission, policies, and then lastly is a flatter hierarchy. A flat hierarchy just encourages diversity. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so I really appreciate flat hierarchies, because whenever everyone feels equal, or whenever everyone is equal, not even feels, but is, their voice, their opinions, they have that, and they're empowered to speak truthfully, candidly, openly, and that is where we get to the heart of issues. That's where we get innovation. That's where we say, yeah, that solution you provided actually doesn't work, and here's why. Here's a potential better solution. People feel empowered to speak the truth when they are at that same level. And that's how we run IGDA, as a flat hierarchy. Of course, you might still have titles, but in terms of who's at the table, who's making decisions, whose opinions and perspectives are being listened to, flat hierarchy.
Yeah, we all matter. And that's important, because then you feel valued and then you stay.
Perfect. So in conclusion, get aligned with yourself, get aligned with the organization and company's values. What is truly your mission, and how does diversity, equity, and inclusion work with that. Oops, did I hit something? And then also consider how you can implement stronger policies, stronger practices, from revising your job postings to creating mentorship programs to ensuring that you have solid practices to retain your workforce. Because I promise you, if you go in like, yeah, let's just get this checklist for diversity, let's do these things, let's hire people who, we consider diverse, and let's see how it works out. It will not work out. They will leave because you didn't create a system for them to thrive.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, and any questions online or here? We have a few minutes.
Do we have a few minutes? Okay.
Happy to answer anything that any questions that anyone might have.
Have you heard of any companies who started remote work, almost put in place also remote pay in place? I find that one kind of a unique approach. Oh, sorry.
You can just repeat that for the screen. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry. My question would be more around remote work in combination with remote pay. And let's say, the case you brought up where somebody in Paraguay makes the same as somebody in Ohio or whatever. Have you seen companies already implementing that, and what examples are out there?
We have a chapter in Lima, Peru, and the one of the leaders of the chapter has been working remotely, Majo, and she's being paid equitably with people that are working in the U.S. So, and there's people that are working out of Africa that are being paid equitably to the European rates that they've been getting because that during COVID, people didn't really necessarily, they were hiring the best people to fill in the jobs, and they put, if you put a salary on there, you're going to want, and people in Africa started to expect to be paid equitably to the rates that people are getting in the US and Europe. And there's 3 different hiring companies where that is their sole mission, to hire remote workers who are paid equitably with US, North American, and European standards.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.